policy can be quite subjective depending on who you're asking, but there are areas that can be objective, particularly if you're speaking to data. And this morning, we'll be doing just that with Mr. Bismarck, who's Managing Director of Financial Derivatives Company Limited, joins us on the program this morning. Mr. Rawani, good morning and welcome to our dedicated coverage of the burial of former President Muhammadu Buhari.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. This is one government that you've tracked so well. Time and again, we've had conversations. There were two economic recessions under late President Muhammadu Buhari. Well, one when he was head of state, almost like he and recessions were destined together. But can you maybe break down the driving forces behind these downturns? Is it oil volatility, policy missteps, or was it just the global stars aligning not in his favor this time?
No, I think what happened was that basically a country's, when you're evaluating the performance of an economy, you've got to look at both exogenous, which is external factors, and domestic factors. And the reality is that if you carry out policies and you have institutional reform to have the institutions that are strong enough to withstand shocks, then the impact of external forces on your domestic economy is reduced. So basically, I think by the time the general got into power, the economy was already suffering from some overheating and a high level of corruption in the economy. But then, everybody saw, it took him 6 months to appoint a cabinet. He was very scared of reform. He had a phobia for reform based on his antecedents when he was in the military. So he was very, very cautious, and many times too cautious. Therefore, what had happened was that eventually, by the time he set up his cabinet, the external economy had become so volatile. The price of oil had dropped. It was about 110 in the previous administration. It dropped all the way to 40. So the circumstances were out of his control or out of Nigeria's control. So, but we were not prepared, we were not mobilized, and therefore, we're slow to respond, right, to the crisis. So the crisis hit us very badly. And if you look at the factors and the variables at that time, in the nominal GDP, when he came in, the 5-year average was about $437 billion. By the time he left, it had dropped to $364 billion. Inflation average was about 21.89. By the time he was leaving, it had increased to almost 25%. The income per head of every Nigerian, as you can see there, income per capita was $2,728. By the time he was leaving, it was $1,597. The exchange rate, when he came in, parallel exchange rate was 660, and by the time he was leaving, it was already about 644. In fact, it was about level. The exchange rate misalignment, the difference between the parallel and the official market, was 309 originally, and then it expanded at the same time. Now, if you go further, the most important thing here is that the external debt, total external debt of Nigeria, when he took over, was about $10.7 billion. By the time he was leaving, it had risen to $42 billion. In other words, it had increased 300%. And this did not include the ways and means, which, what happened was that as the economy started facing problems, then we had a central bank policy of just aligning the ways and means. And so the ways and means grew all the way to about almost 30 trillion naira. And that was a major source of overheating of the economy and destabilizing economic variables. The gross external reserves, which was about $37 billion, dropped to about $33 billion. And total investment, gross capital formation, was about $132 billion when it came in, 5-year average, and it dropped to $128 billion. So the reality is that the economy suffered under his watch, and I was part of the economic management team. There were meetings and recommendations were made. And in some cases, the recommendations were accepted. In some cases, it was further discussed because the economic management team would report to the president. The president would take whatever recommendations through his policy coordination committee to the cabinet, and it went all the way further. But one thing that I noticed was initially when I was approached by then Senator Odoma, who was a minister, to come and consider being the chairman of the minimum wage committee. I had a conversation with Senator Odoma, and I said, look, all minimum wage reviews in this country has always led to economic instability and dodgy wage and all the other ones. The results were always negative. So why should I accept that? So he said he will go back and tell his principal. So he went back and told the principal, and I said, he came back to me and said, look, please, we'd like you to do it. And I said, okay, I want to know who are the other members of the team. And he told me Professor Akpan, Suleiman Barao, Enakabweze was the secretary, and a few others. So I was quite satisfied with the team, and I eventually accepted to be chairman of the minimum wage review committee. So I think we met with the president, and the president said, okay, I want the minimum wage to be reviewed in line with what we can afford. I don't want inflation. I do not want any agitation. I do not want distortion to economic variables. And I said, then you said what you want. You have not told me. You have told me what you do not want, but you have not told me how we are going to resource it. He said, well, that's why we called upon you. So I reluctantly accepted, and this was in 2019, January. I accepted the assignment as a national assignment, and we went to work. And it was just before the elections, and we went to work. And quite frankly, we did all the calculations and everything. And to be honest with you, there was no intervention or interference, either politically or otherwise. We made our recommendations and worked, and he accepted all except for the fact that he wouldn't allow for the sale of the refineries, because we wanted the refineries sold, and so that the money be used for more meaningful purposes like healthcare, education, and agriculture. But he rejected that. He had a sentiment towards the refineries. I would say, there was no reason for the sentiment. The refineries were a drain on national resources. But okay, now with hindsight, you can see that the Dangote refinery has come in and altered the picture, and that maybe we should have sold those refineries well before now. So that was the way I saw it. And we were able to achieve the minimum wage without any rancor. We went from 18,000 to 30,000. And we also were able to neutralize, because inflation there was no major bout of inflation, because we increased the VAT at that time from 5 to 7.5%. So that neutralized the negative effect of that policy. But it was, what I could say was, there was no interference. The man had a phobia he was very worried and afraid of reforms, that the impact of reforms will affect the ordinary man on the street. And basically, it was difficult to explain the macroeconomic big picture for him to understand. But we had an opportunity to explain that, and when it was explained and he understood, that which he will accept, he will accept. That which he will not accept, he will argue, times with different perspectives. But generally speaking, one could not doubt his patriotic feelings, and it wasn't difficult explaining to him. The only difficulty was that he had very rigid views of the past, and he wouldn't let go that easily. But when he let go, he allowed the experts to do what they had to do.
All right, Mr. Arwani, staying on the issue of the economy, apparently from the data available and which FDC has put out that you've listed out, clearly his exit numbers in terms of the macroeconomic dashboard were not quite good, which
No, they were not.
Which informed the drastic action the current administration had to take in terms of taking out some of those wage bills and the difficult decisions. And in fact, I'm looking at the numbers that you listed. Inflation, which is like the blood pressure that has to be brought down by tapering from the monetary authority, increased twice. And so my question will be, if you look at the nexus between the fiscal authority and the monetary authority under his dispensation in that sense, what were the mislink in their intersections such that we're not able to manage inflation positive to a large extent that pushed us where we were?
Well, I think first and foremost, there were what I call periods when there were no fiscal fiscal actors. You know, there was a point when there was no cabinet. There was another point when he was re-elected when there was no cabinet, and everything fell on the hands squarely on the shoulders of the Central Bank of Nigeria at that time. So the Central Bank, most of the Central Bank in that period was just ways and means advances, which technically was printing money. And when you print money, the inflation increases dramatically. And when inflation increases dramatically, it undermines the exchange rate, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, but again, this is what we call hindsight is 20/20 vision. The reality is that he kicked the can down the road, and after the economic team would have met, they would also have a security meeting with his people who would tell him that the possibility that this could create crisis. And he was one that felt very strongly about the ordinary man on the street. And when it's explained to him that this could affect the ordinary man on the street and he couldn't do something about it, he just delayed. And so doing the right thing at the wrong time and doing the wrong thing at the right time comes to the same outcome, gives you the same outcome at the end of the day. So there was procrastination, there was a lack of understanding, and there was phobia. All of this put together gave you a reason for having this difficulty. But when you look at it, some of the indicators moved, some of them, very few of them moved positively, but most of them moved negatively because of the fact that the economy was in what we can call, it was in disequilibrium, partial disequilibrium, right? So you had excess liquidity in the domestic markets. You had falling oil prices on the international market. We had insecurity along the pipelines and all of that, which eventually was solved. So there was theft of oil. There was underinvestment in the oil industry until the PIA was passed much later in the day. But don't forget there are two things. One, there was a global recession, and then also there was COVID. So in an 8-year period, at least four or five of these years were dominated by exceptionally negative external conditions, and some of them globally. But that's not an excuse. If the economy was well managed before then, and during that period, the impact on Nigeria would have not been as severe as it was. So there's no point trying to make excuses for what was not excusable. The reality was that we had exogenous shocks, we had domestic vulnerability, and also we had a lot of what you can call misalignment domestically, and at times what you can call a spade a spade. There was also, we heard, or people said there was massive corruption within the system. So those are the things that undermined the good intentions, right, of the administration. But like they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So there were some difficulties. The leader was fully committed to improving the welfare of the people, but did not have the wherewithal in terms of the resources. There were a number of people who had a lot of influence and were able to change the professional advice that was given by the economists.
I noted earlier that you talked about how the late former president, stuck to old beliefs. But you were a member of his economic advisory team,
Yes.
alongside with other key professionals as far as the economy is concerned. In fact, I'm also reading here that former CBN governor and current governor of Anambra State was also a member of that economic advisory team. With the benefit of hindsight now, when you recall those critical meetings, the council put together on directions for the way forward as far as the economy is concerned, what things do you think could have been done differently by the economic advisory team despite the disposition of the late former president?
No, I think the economic team was solid, purely economics. Well, it wasn't a business council, so you couldn't see people who were coming there as opportunists to take advantage of government. The point is that the time between what we call the lag between when you notice a problem and when you respond to it, and the time when you respond to it and when you feel the impact, and when you feel first of all, identifying the problem, reacting. If the reaction time is long and late, then you would have suboptimal outcomes. Then the outcomes themselves, the time between the outcomes and the impact on the people, and the fact that some of these things were undermined. So there was a lot of photo ops and all of that, but the truth is that the economic team was very well focused, and the records are there to show that recommendations were made. But the time between the recommendations and when they were implemented, there were lags. And by the time the implementation was done, the problem that was 10, if you use it, was 10 points, had actually expanded to 20 or 30 points. So you were behind the curve in terms of the type of the therapy, right? The dose, and then the outcome. So that is what happened. It's not, the economic team could not have envisaged that the global price of oil would drop from 100 to 40, and they reacted to that by trying to cut back and asked the government to do certain things, right? They also, the COVID came in, and in fact, everybody was meeting virtually at the point. And then we had all those reactions. But the exogenous shocks were so severe that the domestic buffers that the country had were not strong enough to withstand it. And also, because of the slow response time, right? You'll find that the economy itself suffered severely, right? And then there were, of course, in between there was an election in 2019, and then came COVID, and then by the time COVID was off, they were already ready for another election. So there were what I call economic distractions, which were compounded by a phobia for reform and change based on the antecedents of the leadership, the overhang of military beliefs that a command economy worked. And every time you try to have a command economy, ended up with negative outcomes or unintended consequences. So the reality is that the scorecard does not show any excellent performance, or they're all more or less negative. The scorecard between then and now also shows that the lags are still, the Nigerian economy is still suffering from those lags. But slowly but surely, we believe that sooner or later, as things may begin to get better.
Right.
And we are cautiously optimistic that things will. We know that inflation will moderate. We know that the exchange rate has been stable all this time. We know that the ways and means advances have stopped.
Right.
It will appear that the monetary policy is very well focused at this time to maintaining stability of the exchange rate and creating an open and transparent market. We've seen that Dangote refinery has been able to intervene, and we are beginning to see price of petrol come down. But compared to where we were in 2015, the picture is still very, very bad and is bizarre.
The way you chronicled that journey, particularly also because you were in that advisory team, and it's interesting to hear some of the things that went down. But we have to thank you so much, Mr. Bismarck Rwani, who's Managing Director of Financial Derivatives Company Limited. Thank you so much for your time on this, our special coverage.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're still staying with the objective part of the late President Muhammadu Buhari's legacy, the economy. Speaking to data, I've just been joined by Dr. Muda Yusuf, who's Managing Director and CEO of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, CPP. He's live with us in our Lagos studio. Good morning, Dr. Yusuf.
Good morning, Kayode.
So this is looking at the part of the legacy that you can really speak to. The data doesn't lie, they say, well, at least most of the time, right? The politics bit of it, there's a lot of controversy around it, but the economic angle is really clear. And you would even hear this government time to time saying, we inherited a terrible economy, we're trying to raise the economy. So it's like everybody sort of agrees as to what the economic outcome of the Buhari administration, 2 administrations, was. But again, it's a contradiction, because the people close to him will say this was a disciplined man, this was a man of integrity, and you'd expect that that will flow into every part or every part of our life as a nation. So what was maybe the missing link for you? Having studied the man, the way he makes his appointments, decisions, what was the missing link for you?
Well, just as you said, he had a reputation of being a man of integrity. And that is what endeared him to many people, even during the electoral process. But we have since realized that integrity is not enough. When you are talking about it, integrity is important, character is important. But we need much more than that to fix even to fix any system. Even in the corporate organizations, the fact that you're a man of integrity does not guarantee that you can manage a system well. Of course, he had a good economic team. He just spoke with Bismarck. There was Professor doing Salami, But what was clear at that time was that there was a major ideological difference in terms of, economic philosophy. The Buhari administration, both Buhari himself and the CBN governor in particular, because the CBN governor at that time loomed very large. In fact, he was like the coordinating minister of the economy, because he was everywhere. And he also had the funds, So there was that conflict. So he believed a lot more in a state-led economy. He wasn't somebody that believed in a market economy. So all this issue of deregulation, floating of the currency, withdrawal of subsidy, and all of that didn't resonate well with him. And again, you can understand, because he has a welfareist disposition. He worries about the common man, about the talakawas, and so on. And he believed that if he allowed all these neoliberal policies to go on, that the ordinary people will suffer. That was his own thinking. Of course, there are arguments on both sides, because it was like kicking the can down the road. So all those fundamental decisions that needed to be taken, particularly from an economic reform point of view, didn't happen.
So, Prof,
we had some, also those things affected the economic fundamentals, but the consequences didn't immediately manifest, because a lot of things were going wrong. But on the face of it, things were looking good. So that is the way I will look at it,
I like the way you put it, Doctor, and I'm just thinking now, because we're looking at the life of the man,
yes,
Muhammadu Buhari,
yeah,
both as a person and as a president.
Yes.
And this time, and this segment, we're looking at him as a president,
yes,
given his disposition, as you stated. Now, Mr. Rwani has said that he was also quite afraid to take certain decisions. He wasn't comfortable, like you stated. So, having seen his disposition, Was it a failure on those advising him to walk around his disposition and not show him something that he would never agree to? Because on one hand, welfarism is not bad in its entirety. It's whether or not you can fund it. So what kind of picture do you think they did not paint to him to be able to work within his own ideology that led us where we are?
You know, the position a leader will take will depend on the kind of people around him or her. You know, those who had his ears at that time didn't believe in the orthodox approach to economic management. You know, the economic team he formed, which had some very sound, technocrats, didn't have much influence in terms of getting his attention, as against somebody like the then CBN governor, for instance. You know, so that was the problem. Because if there is no consensus about how the economy should go, and because of the welfarist poor, disposition, you have this other set telling you that these orthodox economic policies will hurt the common people. So he was more disposed towards those who believe in unorthodox monetary policy. And you can see that during that regime, the monetary policy loomed very large. The CBN governor was practically managing both the fiscal and the monetary side of the economy. Program. Yes. So we had the Anchors Borough program, you have the intervention fund on manufacturing, on SMEs, on aviation, on healthcare, all sorts of intervention funds. But nobody, at least those who believed in that ideology of unorthodox policy, were not looking at the sustainability of it.
Yeah.
So there was a short-term...
Pardon me, Jeffrey's question is important,
yes.
And I'm going to follow up on it, but we must take a moment now to touch base with our correspondent Sadiq Ilyasu in Katsina, where we hear that dignitaries have begun arriving and lining up to receive, the arrival, the aircraft that will be bearing the remains of late former President Muhammadu Buhari. But Sadiq Ilyasu has the specific updates for us. Hello, Sadiq. We're trying to hear you, but we see that, there are activities gradually building up where you are. We can see security operatives on standby. We see quite a number of vehicles, but perhaps you would want to unmute so that we can hear you. Tell us exactly what's happening where you are and what you're hearing about the arrival of the aircraft.
Yeah. As I can tell you now that we are still waiting for the arrival of the aircraft. Important dignitaries like the governor of Katsina State, his deputy governor, including his commissioners, are all here already. Other politicians are also coming from different parts of the country down here, while some are moving directly straight to Daura. So here we are waiting for the arrival of the body of the late president. And we are expecting him to arrive around 12 a.m. And as I can tell you, a lot of people have come to Katsina, and the security is seriously beefed up. In fact, one can say the number of the security personnel deployed is almost equivalent to the number of people that are coming to the state for this burial ceremony that's going to happen. And also there are military personnel preparing for a ceremony, since he's he was a military personnel, so this is also expected. So we are here and we'll keep you posted as events unfold. Back to you.
Yes, Sadiq, I believe you're at the VIP lounge of the airport in Katsina, but please establish exactly where you are. And when the aircraft eventually arrives, give us an understanding of the procession, where the procession will be headed to from there. Where exactly in Daura? Would it be the former president's country home, family house exactly? Just help us understand what to expect from this point.
Yeah, we are here at Umaru Musa Air Abdullah International Airport. They are limiting the access of people, so only a few people can gain access to where the aircraft is going to land. Fortunately, we have somebody down there. So from here, if the body arrives, they are moving straight to Daura, his hometown, where he's going to be buried there. Yeah, actually, the prayer is going to take place at the helipad, whereas his body is going to be buried within his residence. Back to you.
All right. Our correspondent there, Sadiq Ilyasu, reporting from the Sheikh Musa Yaradua Airport in Katsina, and he's brought us up to speed with what to expect from that point. Of course, we know that the aircraft bearing the remains of the late former president will arrive from about 1:42 p.m. From what Sadiq has said. Sadiq will touch base with you yet again as soon as you have updates for us. There you have it. There's more updates coming through. Dignitaries are arriving. Katsina.
Yeah.
We see some members of the presidential committee set up, to oversee activities lined up for the burial. We just saw Minister of Information, Mr. Mohammed Idris, arriving alongside other officials. So from here, it appears that it will get busier from this point. Of course, Channels Television is live for you in Katsina and in Daura, the country home of former President Muhammadu Buhari. Yes, more dignitaries are arriving.
So you can see a lot of the dignitaries. There was a presidential committee set up just about 48 hours ago or 24 hours ago to ensure the smooth activities as far as this is concerned. It's a state burial, so it's not just confined to the Buhari family. So this is going to be a committee from the federal government, because it was a president and commander-in-chief of the armed forces of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, GCFR. So it will bury it as a state man in conjunction with the Katsina state government as well as the Buhari family. Together, this team is put together to make sure that is given this last and well respect that it deserves at this very last moment of ease. We showed you a moment ago the aircraft, which is now airborne, heading to Nigeria from London. We expect the funeral to take place, according to Islamic rites, by 2 p.m. or thereabout. So this was the moment when the aircraft was taxiing at the London airport. The presidential aircraft taxiing at the London airport, heading to the runway to take off to Nigeria. But as we speak, it's already airborne. So we're giving you minute-by-minute reportage as to what is happening from London to the aircraft down to what's going on in Katsina, as well as what's happening in Daura. At some point, we'll touch base with Daura to tell you exactly what is happening in the hometown of the president, where lots of dignitaries are already present. By the way, the president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu, will be the one to receive the body of the former president, Muhammadu Buhari, who will be led by the vice president, who had been there from the very moment where the nation learned of his death. The president had asked the vice president and his chief of staff to head straight to London, who have been able to put all of the arrangements together to ensure that Muhammadu Buhari is given the last respect.
Yes, indeed. And don't forget that this is supposed to have all of the elements of a state funeral. And so we've seen right there where Sadiq reported from men of the armed forces in a sort of match past preparing for the funeral. So we'll expect to see something beyond the ordinary to honor the memory of the late former president, Muhammadu Buhari. Members of the Federal Executive Council are already on ground, some of whom form the committee set up by the federal government to oversee the activities that have been lined up for this funeral. And so we'll return to Katsina moments from now to get more updates. We understand also that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is also on ground. As a matter of fact, he is the one that will receive the aircraft upon arrival. the videos from just moments ago there of members of the Federal Executive Council touching down on Katsina.
So let's walk you through the committee. Of course, it's chaired by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Senator Judge Akume. You have other members, Minister of Finance, Minister of Budget, even the FCT Minister, and the rest. So 25 members of the Federal Executive Council have been directed to also proceed to Katsina. So you see them landing in Katsina for, of course, the burial rites. As has been said, President Bola Tinubu will be receiving the remains of the late former President Muhammadu Buhari. Will thereafter proceed to Dora, where the janazah, that's a funeral prayer, will take place, followed by interment at the late President's residence. So all eyes on the Umaru Musa Yar'Adua International Airport in Katsina, as the nation awaits the arrival of the aircraft bearing the remains of former President Muhammadu Buhari.
All right, so back to the studio now. We still have with us Dr. Muda Yusuf, and some very important things were coming through from your explanation to Jeffrey's question earlier about the former president's disposition towards the economy, his preference for welfarist policies. But we've seen that in other countries, welfarist policies have been successful in Scandinavian countries. The fact that there's also a divide between the understanding or the approach towards managing the economy in different administrations of the same political parties, another kettle of fish entirely. But from that particular aspect of the management of the economy under the former president's regime, what do you understand to be, what's your assessment of the former president's understanding of the economy, and what does that say about the credentials of the man who should occupy the top job of president of a country as huge as Nigeria?
The economy ultimately is about people. It's about the welfare of the people. So whatever policies we adopt must have that as the end game or the main objective. That for me was where he was coming from. But the process of delivering that outcome is what, in my view, was not very appropriate. I said that because you started the example of countries where this welfarist approach, where we have a state-led economy. I mean, China, for instance, there's a whole lot of influence of the state, in such economies. But in our own environment, because you also need to look at the peculiarities of your own environment. For you to be able to go that route and set aside perhaps or sidestep the market system, if you want the state to lead, you must have strong state institutions. Because if you don't have strong state institutions and you saddle the state with so much responsibilities, you are not likely to get the right outcomes, which is what we had. Now, we had institutions of state, for instance, practically allocating foreign exchange. Because at that time, this market approach was not applicable. And because we adopted a fixed exchange rate, which the supply of forex or our capacity to fund the market could not support, then you have to resort to rationing. And we saw what happened under that system. We saw how the institutions were heavily compromised. And that led to almost a practical collapse of the external sector. So much so that at a point, our letters of credit were not being honored by correspondent banks abroad. So we were getting to a point where the international trade process was almost collapsing. So even though for those who have the connection to get the forex, I mean, they had a field day. Some of them were not really critically in any business. Some of them, a lot of arbitrage, round tripping became the order of the day. So if you want to adopt that kind of economic management philosophy, you must have very strong state institutions. But unfortunately, We don't have that.
Would it have made any difference if the late former president had some competence or academic qualifications in the area of the economy?
Of course, it could have made a lot of difference because you'll be able to communicate better with the economic team. Because, you know, when you are in that position, people will come with different ideas. Some of the ideas will look populist, and it will appeal to you as somebody who has a welfareist disposition. At that, no, I don't want to hurt the poor. If this is what it is, let the exchange rate remain at this level. Let the fuel price remain at this level. You know? So that was it. But, so it's a short-term perspective. It's a populist perspective. No, but if you have that much knowledge, you don't have to be an economist. But if you really understand the issues, the communication between the economic team or the technical team and the president will be much easier. And he'll be able to appreciate the quality of those advice. I think that was the missing link. I mean, look at how long we left the NNPC to continue to import fuel for almost 8 years. The refineries were not working. We were throwing money at it. We were turning around maintenance, and at the same time, we were importing fuel heavily and subsidizing it.
We're still importing.
No, the importation has gone down significantly now. You know, at least we are seeing a major shift in the importation regime. You know, so these are some of the challenges that you have. Even at that time, with all those problems, we are still able to keep the fuel price low. And of course, in fairness, the citizens were happy. At least to be buying fuel at 165, 200. It was good.
There were some difficulties and complaints at the time as well.
Yes, occasionally, you know, when things strip in terms of supply chain and all of that, there'll be queues and all of that. But by the time some ships land again, the fuel will begin to flow.
Was there also
but the issue was how sustainable was that?
As we went to wind, was there also a problem with his team? Was it a question of him not, or him being afraid to take difficult decision, or inability to be able to grasp the entirety of the consequence of some of the things he was holding on to, or insufficient quality advice? I'm not talking about the Salam of this world that came to advise from the outside. I mean within his economy. I mean Minister of Finance and all of those people directly who speak to him every day.
You see, there's a psychology most times among those in government. Once you see the body language of the president, that this is what the president wants,
you align.
Everybody just align. Not many people have the courage to say, Mr. President, this is not the way to go. So we have that problem in governance. And because people saw his body language, nobody wanted to talk anything about reforming anything. This is what the president wants. Please, let's just flow along with it. I think that is what happened.
You know, some will say it's a political thing. Some others will say maybe it's also a cultural thing. Once, you know, the head says something, nobody would want to say, well, I think you're wrong, sir. It's almost like a taboo to try to challenge the head. Even if the head is wrong, let's just go into the sea together. But lots of lessons to learn, clearly, and it's great the way you chronicle it. I want to ask about the private sector, if we still have some time. How the private sector fared under late President Muhammadu Buhari. Is there a way you can caption it in a few sentences in terms of ease of business in that sense? In fact, there was a whole talk about ease of doing business and all of that. But the reality of it, how was it for the private sector?
Well, it was mixed. I would say that. It was mixed because if you look at the credit environment, even though it was seen as a bit unorthodox, but all those intervention funds to manufacturers, I won't talk about the Anchor Borrowers program because that was a lot of scandal around that, to the aviation sector, to the health sector, even this our national theater that has come alive. All of those things were outcomes of those unorthodox, approach to credit. Because I know of manufacturers who actually confessed to me that if not for those intervention funds, his company will have, had a lot of challenges.
So he was kind to the private sector?
Not entirely. That's why I say it was mixed.
Right.
When you look at issue of Forex, for instance, Forex was key for the private sector. It was a major challenge.
Indeed.
If you don't have the connection, you don't have that, you need people, all sorts of intermediaries. We're having a field day, all sorts of brokers, middlemen. That was not good for the private sector.
Right.
So that was a major issue.
Dr. Yusuf,
Yeah.
still a lot to say, but I'm glad we're able to speak to the areas that are objective.
Yeah.
The data speaks to it, and we have to thank you so much for speaking on this very important occasion. We'll be speaking with Dr. Muda Yusuf, Managing Director and CEO of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, which is why I asked about the private enterprise. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll take a moment now, but just to remind you that activities are picking up at the Umaru Musa Yar'Adua International Airport in Katsina, as the governor, the federal government delegation is live there, and even the military for the procession, they're live there, awaiting the arrival of the aircraft bearing the remains of former President Muhammadu Buhari. When we return, we'll talk more about his life and time. Stay with us.